Russians can tolerate the economic collapse and fuel crisis, but rising alcohol prices could trigger mass unrest in Russia, Oleg Zhdanov suggested. If the 1917 revolution were to repeat itself, it would likely be due to a lack of access to sufficient vodka, not food. More news from Moskovia. A trouble has struck from an unexpected source. Vodka prices have skyrocketed in the Russian Federation. Their main national product has suddenly become much more expensive. Since the beginning of the year, as of May 18, the average retail price of vodka has jumped 12.2%. This was reported by the executive director of the Rusprodsoyuz Association. According to this director, the key reason for the sharp price increase is the increase in excise taxes on alcoholic beverages, the military expert reported. Zhdanov emphasized, "I'll say that all of this can be summed up in one word: war against Ukraine. Taxes need to be collected, but there's a catastrophic shortage of funds for the war. Now people in the Russian Federation will drink less, but Putin will continue to finance the war against our country. That's the sad arithmetic, although I can tell you that raising the price of alcoholic beverages in the Russian Federation could lead to a revolution like 1917. The Kremlin offered more indications that it's acknowledging Russia's economy is in trouble after years of relying on military spending for growth. Economy Development Minister Maxim Reshetnikov told a business conference that the economy is not easy and called for reallocating the workforce, which has been tight as Russia's war on Ukraine and the boom in defense production have created labor shortages. Of course, it's not easy to find staff, and salaries are rising, he said. But nonetheless, we coped with all of that somehow because somewhere in the economy there were reserves. Our current records show that these reserves have largely been used up. This truly is the situation, and the macroeconomic situation is substantially more difficult. Reshetnikov added that the ruble has appreciated more than he would prefer and that interest rates are still too high despite a series of rate cuts from the central bank. Businesses will have to figure out how to manage costs and spending while also boosting productivity, he said, citing advances in artificial intelligence. Recently, the central bank slashed the benchmark interest rate again, marking the fifth straight half-point reduction, to bring it down to 14.5%. A significant risk from external conditions is the situation in the Middle East, Governor Elvira Nabiullina said at a briefing. If the conflict drags on, the negative effects on the Russian economy will grow. The latest cut came a week after Russian President Vladimir Putin made his concerns about the economy public as he vented frustration at ministers and demanded they offer solutions. The situation has grown so dire that a veteran lawmaker in Russia said that people could rise up and stage a revolution like the Bolsheviks did in 1917. Gennady Zhuganov, the longtime leader of Russia's Communist Party, told the lower house of parliament that the meeting Putin convened with his ministers was the gloomiest in a long time. If you do not urgently adopt financial, economic and other measures, by autumn a repeat of what happened in 1917 awaits us, he said. We don't have the right to repeat that. Let's take some decisions. Russia's economy contracted by 1.8% in the first 2 months of 2026, marking the first quarterly decline since early 2023, with growth slowing to 1% in 2025. High interest rates, a strong ruble, labor shortages, and budget constraints are squeezing businesses and households, while sanctions and war spending weigh on long-term prospects. Rising oil prices from the Iran conflict may boost revenues, but analysts warn they cannot offset structural problems or prevent recessionary pressures. Zhuganov's intervention follows President Putin's unusually public rebuke of top economic officials, including central bank head Elvira Nabiullina, over disappointing macroeconomic indicators. While Putin has demanded new measures to boost growth, experts caution that replacing experienced technocrats could unsettle markets and worsen instability. The combination of elite tension, slowing growth, and public dissatisfaction creates a volatile backdrop for Zhuganov's warning. By referencing the 1917 revolution, which toppled Russia's monarchy and led to Soviet rule, Zhuganov evoked a potent historical parallel to underscore the risks of ignoring economic grievances. His framing cast revolution as a danger to avoid, reinforcing his party's role as a loyal opposition that critiques policy execution without challenging core power structures. The warning signals awareness within the system of potential social unrest, even under conditions of censorship and protest bans. Recall, since coming to power in 2000, Russian leader Vladimir Putin has built one of the most repressive and effective dictatorships in the world. That process accelerated sharply after his full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, when, increasingly paranoid about his society's reaction to the wisdom of that war, Putin cracked down on all internal dissent. He chased out the last remnants of independent media, shut down civil society organizations that were even mildly critical of his war, and had Russia's most popular opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, killed. He accompanied this destruction of independent organizations and leaders with a comprehensive propaganda campaign to maintain support for his war and his regime. Tragically, Putin's strategy for strengthening dictatorship after launching his full-scale invasion has worked, at least so far. But lately, there are some signs that cracks in the autocratic regime may be emerging. Putin is failing to achieve his important objectives. When dictators fail, they create opportunities for change. We know from studies of past collapses of autocratic rule that losing wars and poorly performing economies are often precipitants of political change. Even in Russian history, these two factors have triggered revolutionary change. The Russian Empire crumbled in 1917 in part as a result of an unpopular and unsuccessful war, World War I. The Soviet Union fell apart in part because of a stagnant economy. In Putin's Russia, there are parallels to both. First, Putin's biggest failure is his war in Ukraine. More than 4 years after launching his full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Putin has failed to achieve any of the military objectives that he himself articulated back in 2022. Despite waging a war that has now lasted longer than the Soviet Union's war with Nazi Germany, Putin has not conquered or subjugated all of Ukraine. He has not achieved denazification, his grotesque euphemism for regime change. The democratically elected president and parliament of Ukraine remain in power. He has failed dramatically at demilitarizing Ukraine, which is today more militarized than ever in its history. And he has failed to stop NATO expansion, with two powerful countries, Finland and Sweden, joining the alliance because of his war, and NATO ties to Ukraine are now deeper than ever before. It is hard to say how much knowledge Russian citizens have about these failures. But the scale of Russian casualties means that everyone knows someone who has lost a loved one in this war. And without question, elites know about the absence of success on the battlefield. Splits within the ruling elite are often the first move in the transition from autocratic rule. Putin's regime is still strong. Repression works. But history suggests that the appearance of strength in autocracies can be misleading, especially when sustained by war, fear, and isolation. The signs of strain visible in Russia today are limited and fragmented, and on their own, they are unlikely to produce change.